We were the first on the summit, great summit, but we weren't there long because it was so cold. We came down and I started to have a pressure build up in my eyes, kind of a retinal hemorrhage. So I lost about 60% of my vision coming down off the summit of Everest, having been climbing for over 24 hours. I was really scared, and I recorded a video actually to say thank you to all the Iceland colleagues who'd supported and donated and done their own charity raising. But you can see my eyes are just a ballooning mess, and looking back, you can see how scared I am.
You were thinking you might die?
I was up high. I could feel my eyes starting to go, and the worst thing of all is that I was lying next to a dead body.
Hello and welcome to Crisis What Crisis, the podcast that explores life's toughest moments with the people who've lived them, learned from them and come back stronger. I'm Andy Coulson, and if you've been through or are facing a crisis or just want to be better prepared for life's inevitable difficulties, then these conversations are all about providing those useful, practical lessons that will help you survive, rebuild and thrive again. And if this is your first time with us, please do hit subscribe wherever you're watching or listening, and please do leave us a review. It really helps make sure that these conversations are shared more widely. Now, today's episode is a bit different, a Crisis What Crisis business special. We're joined by someone who has used business not just as a means to profit, but as a platform to push for real, often radical change. Richard Walker, OBE, is Executive Chairman of Iceland Foods, the supermarket chain founded by his father Malcolm and one of Britain's most outspoken business leaders. But this is not a story of inherited power. It's a story of hard choices, personal loss, and a deep sense of responsibility. After building a successful career in property, Richard took a sharp turn left, motivated by the devastating early-onset Alzheimer's diagnosis of his mother. He joined the family business from the very bottom, working on the shop floor as a shelf stacker, then climbing his way up, just as he's gone on to climb so many mountains.
The thing that I find very important is to get myself out of my comfort zone, and this obviously lovely life that I have, to continue to be uncomfortable, to challenge myself, to really kind of get to the core of what I am.
He's since become a pioneering force in sustainable retail, taking the radical decision to remove palm oil from Iceland's own brand products, launching bold campaigns on plastic reduction and food poverty, and writing The Greengrocer, a personal manifesto that challenged British business to do better. That work has earned him praise, some criticism, and a bit of political heat. And more recently, Iceland has made headlines again for a different kind of boldness, proposing that low-risk offenders be sentenced not to prison but to a job in their stores. Richard's story, like so many of our guests, is shaped by crisis. His mother's illness and death, a harrowing Everest summit in 2023 to raise money in her memory, a collapse during the 2024 London Marathon that nearly cost him his life, and more recently, a disillusioning exit from party politics. Yet at every stage, he's responded not with retreat but with action. Richard Walker, welcome to Crisis What Crisis.
Thank you. Great to be here. What an intro.
I'm going to ask, as we get started, as we do from time to time with guests, what's your definition of crisis?
Well, it's a good question. I suppose it's, in my view, it's something that you're not prepared for or weren't expecting and maybe don't have a plan for. So there's a bit of a contradiction in terms of how to prepare for a crisis if you don't know what that crisis is. But we've all got plans and dreams, particularly in business. We've got strategies, and when something comes in and knocks you sideways and throws you off course, then I'd pretty much call that a crisis.
I watched an interview of yours in preparation for today's chat with a former Crisis What Crisis guest, Piers Morgan. It's from a few years ago now. You were on GMTV to promote your controversial but extremely successful Christmas ad. It's all part of a campaign to remove or reduce the amount of products in Iceland that contain palm oil. We'll talk about that in a bit more detail later.
Sure.
But the ad had been banned on the basis of being political. So from a PR point of view, it was wasn't unhelpful. But Piers wasn't going to give you an easy ride, and Piers, being Piers, actually gave you a pretty torrid time, essentially questioning your your motives, your values. It was actually pretty personal stuff and went on for quite some time.
Yeah.
The thing that struck me about the interview is that there are several moments, Stuart, you weren't smiling, but you look like you're enjoying it.
You're very astute.
Does that chime? It's
totally
does that
true.
reveal something about you?
It's totally true. And that was not long before I'd sort of started doing media. I'd only been exposed to that whole world and hostile interviews for maybe a year or so. So he came out of the blocks charging, and you're right, he wasn't going to let up on me, and it was personal. But I don't know what it is that's in me. I just loved it. I loved the cut and thrust of it, the challenge, and I just wasn't going to back down. And I wanted to prove him wrong, because I truly believed in what we were doing. I knew it didn't come from a place of trying to be disingenuous, and I thought it was the right thing for our customers and for the environment. So I held the course. We had a proper punch up, but I just really enjoyed the debate, and I came off. I remember the camera crew all clapping and saying I handled him brilliantly. And you know what? He's a pantomime villain. He absolutely gives it 100% on air, but off air he's the nicest guy, and we're regularly in touch. He sends me emails saying well done on this or that, and he ended up endorsing my book on the front cover.
Yeah, superb. There we are. Opportunity out of a crisis a lot of people would have struggled to handle, I think.
Yeah.
Day to day then, 1,000 stores, 5 million customers, 30,000 employees. Iceland is one of Britain's best known businesses, an important business. How does that sort of day to day responsibility sit with you? Just to give us a bit of a sense of how you manage that.
Well, it blows your mind if you try and break it down to each and every employee. But I feel very heavily the burden of responsibility for the business to do well, so that we can continue to pay more hours. Because, as I say, we've got 30,000 people who rely on me for a paycheck each week, for a mortgage or to build their lives. It's a huge responsibility. But I think if you've got an amazing team around you, which I do, and you're delegating effectively, whilst also keeping a real eye on the detail of what's going on, because there's a big difference between abdication and delegation for such a massive organisation. I think that's where you can be most effective as a leader. And of course, I have the flip side of it. It is this enormous family legacy, a business that was started by my dad, but also my mum, who thought of the name, my late mum. So, I've worn that burden quite heavily over the years. But I think finally, as I'm getting into my mid-40s, I'm starting to feel like I've got a right to be there, and that I'm enjoying it, and actually that I really do bring something to the table and add value.
How recently have you felt that kind of sense of a comfort around?
Last week or two. No, it's something that's developed. Obviously I'm outwardly confident, but I think everyone has something inside them that maybe people don't see. And with me, there is this kind of driving sense to prove my worth to other people, but also to myself. I'm painfully aware of the privilege that has been afforded to me in life, and I just want to make sure that I use it to the absolute best of my abilities. I'm not actually a natural shopkeeper by instinct or background. I'm a property guy. So I know I'm not the best person when it comes to working out price and promotion and merchandising of where to stick the chips. But I know I'm damn good at leading and motivating teams, and getting people to want to work with me, and selling the why internally as to some of the great work and campaigning that we do. And I think I've kind of grown into those shoes quite comfortably. But you say emotionally, how do I handle such a big organisation? The other hat I wear is as chairman of and founder of Bywater, which is a big property business now that I set up before I went into Iceland. We've now been acquired by Sumitomo Forestry Corporation of Japan. We're building a £1 billion development in London of commercial office buildings and residential living space. So that's becoming a huge business. But we only employ 25 people. I'd say that's just as stressful as employing 30,000 people.
Interesting.
And almost because you have more of a direct line to them.
Yeah. I think it'd be easy for anyone sort of listening to or just sort of skimming the surface of your story to think that, mum and dad set the journey on its way, created Iceland, and therefore you're becoming the sort of top man eventually was a sort of shoe-in. But it wasn't like that at all. In fact, as you say, you built this separate business, Bywater, which has continued to thrive. You actively chose to make your name outside of Iceland, first and foremost.
Even outside of this country.
Indeed, you went to Poland, I think, didn't you, to start your first business venture?
Yeah.
Unusual place to decide that's where I'm going to build my career.
Absolutely.
Just tell me about that, and tell me about what was in your mind at that stage.
Well, when I graduated from Durham Uni, I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I was absolutely sure I didn't want to try and emulate my dad. Impossible shoes to fill. And I wanted to plough my own furrow to prove to other people, but also to myself, that I could succeed on my own account. And I sort of alighted on this whole world of commercial property that I didn't really know about, but I did have a passing kind of knowledge of from, of course, the Iceland store site finding, the Iceland store portfolio. And I managed to get a job with what was Jones Lang LaSalle on Hanover Square on their coveted grad scheme. I just loved it. I ended up as a West End investment agent. It was right, at the height of the property boom in kind of early noughties. And it was just a great time to learn. We were selling buildings to, everything from sovereign wealth funds to private Irish syndicators of dentists. And, it was just a wild time. But I was really keen to do my own thing because I'd grown up in an entrepreneurial family. So I just knew I couldn't get a foothold in the door in the UK. So I moved to Poland. Couldn't speak the language, didn't know anything about it. But they're 40 million people, the size of Germany, really well educated. And importantly, they were just so hungry for it because they'd had decades, 70 years of oppression under communism, etc. And it was like a gold rush. And it was such an exciting time. It was me in a little windowless office. I didn't really know what the hell I was doing, but I found my first deal, which was a forward funding of a small residential block. Then I found my next deal, which was a retail kind of strip mall. Then we found an office and we built up a team, and I persuaded some guys to come over from the UK. No one had ever heard of Iceland, or quite frankly gave a shit who my dad was, and it was liberating. I loved it, and I fell so many times. I made so many mistakes, but I loved every single one of them. And looking back, I worked damn hard, but I was very proud of the business we built. And the funny thing at the end, when we moved back home, I pulled the handle on everything that we'd sold and made and lost, and I got to the bottom to see what the net profit was, and it was exactly zero after 7 years of hard work. But it was worth every penny because firstly I set out the credit crunch in the UK. If I was investing here, I would have lost a fortune. But secondly, it gave me the confidence, the experience, the skill sets, the contacts to go again. And we started again in London in 2009. Wasn't easy, there was no money around, but we managed to raise a bit, do a deal, raise a bit. And then, as I said, the Japanese conglomerate Sumitomo came in and bought 51% of the business 2 years ago, and now
that must have been a great day.
It was awesome because it had been struggling, that property business, for a while, and now we've got a $10 billion listed conglomerate behind us who are fabulous partners, and we're their exclusive European partner.
But the money and the kind of securing the future of the business in the way that you just described, but for you as well, as a kind of affirmation of your decision as a young man to go off and try and build something. That's what's led to that moment, right? I mean, for you, that's just a great personal moment, right?
Yeah. Now I'm like a proud granddad. I come into the office. They've got an office on Chancery Lane. I just, in awe of what they're doing. The huge building. I mean, they're building thousands of apartments across London, and the biggest timber-framed office building in the UK, opposite the Houses of Parliament. They're doing some really significant architecturally groundbreaking work, all out of timber, so it's all low carbon. It's very cool, but very different to selling frozen peas. So I have a bit of a dual life, really.
Yeah, wonderful. Let's try and work out then where that sort of grit and the independence, if you like, of thought and action came from. Tell me a bit about your upbringing with your mum, Rani, dad, Malcolm, who I assume for a large part of your childhood were running headlong towards building this astonishing business. Tell me a bit about your childhood.
You called her Annie, that's nice. So I mean, they met at school. And Mum's dad was a miner, and then in Wales, and he moved to Yorkshire to be a Baptist minister. Dad's dad was a miner who had an accident early, and was kind of retired by his mid-40s. So yeah, both my granddads were miners and very working class backgrounds. Mum and Dad met at Merfield Grammar in Yorkshire, and they were a brilliant entrepreneurial couple. He was sweeping the floors at Woolies, and he worked his way up to become manager. But it was a tough life, and there was no kind of HR looking after you then. You were just told on the Friday where you'd be working the opposite end of the country on a Monday. Mum, was amazing support, and really was the reason Dad was able to move around and do well at Woolies and ultimately be an entrepreneur. He said he didn't even know what the word meant, but it was because of Mum's stable career as a teacher that he could afford to take gambles on these sideline gigs. So they tried selling strawberries on the Horseshoe Pass in Llangollen. They set up a late night fish and chip shop. And then he alighted on the idea of selling loose frozen food, which he nicked from Lewis's department store in Leeds. And she worked on the checkout, and Dad did the stock. He got everything on credit. By the end, and this was a tiny little shop, not much bigger than this room, loose scoop, over-the-counter frozen food in North Shropshire in Oswestry. By the end of the first week, they turned a profit. And for 54 years ever since, we've made a profit. So it was amazing being around this story. But it was pre-phones, it was pre-laptops, so it was a different time. And when Dad was home, he was Dad. He wasn't distracted. Right. So, I look back very fondly on my childhood and felt I had super engaged parents, very loving home. There was nothing, there was no compromise there, which was brilliant. But I did have this kind of passing knowledge about the business from around the dining room table. You
so often, it's an astonishing story, the story of Iceland, and of what your mum and dad built. But often what sits alongside that story is the kind of the cost of it.
Yeah.
When you speak to entrepreneurs, it normally often comes with,
yeah.
But I had to make sacrifices, and invariably that involves family.
Yeah.
But it sounds as though your mum and dad found a balance.
They found such a good groove. I don't know how they made it work, but they did. And Dad's from Yorkshire, and he's often fond of saying, "I never missed a sports day," which I don't know if that's entirely true, but it's sort of thing. It kind of makes sense.
Well, if you got to most of them, that
exactly.
That is a small triumph.
But it was great, and and it wasn't a straight line to success. He was kicked out. He owed all a share sales scandal. There was a CFA inquiry. I remember being at uni and opening the Daily Mail. It was a double-page spread with their house, and the headline was "Meltdown" and the city baying for his blood. So, these crises, they kind of come and go, but there have been many over the years. How
did he handle that with you as his son?
I think
you're at uni.
Yeah.
I'm sure people were paying attention to it.
Yeah.
It was in the news.
Yeah.
Pretty for quite a period of time, that moment.
Yeah.
How did he handle it with you?
He was really good. He called me to try and explain what happened, but I kind of cut him short and said, "Dad, it doesn't matter. It's cool. It's fine." And I think that was giving him a bit of permission to be upset about it and to face into the reality of what had happened. But I'll never forget when I was at uni, I was home for the holidays, and he had just been kicked out physically from Iceland. So all of his files, all of his paperwork, he drove home with a van following him, and I offered to help. He couldn't even look me in the eye. He just quietly unpacked it himself, and put it all in the garage. And this was his baby, that he started in 1970. And it had gone, and he was disgraced. It was a hell of a time. But it's a measure of the man that what he then ended up doing, he didn't sulk for too long, because he set up a rival frozen food chain, ironically called Cool Trader, which wasn't supposed to be a double tip of the hat to the city, but he set up about 50 of those stores, and that ended up becoming the equity piece for when Bauga, the Icelandic venture capital company, bought Iceland, and they were desperate to get Dad back into the company. Cool Trader was his equity, if you like. So that enabled him to get back in, ultimately buy out Bauga, the Icelandic government, bring in a consortium of investors, and then a few years ago we bought it back entirely privately. And it's a family business.
It's just the most. It's the most astonishing. It's the most astonishing business story. I mean, I want to talk about your fierce independence, which is essentially what takes you to Poland. But when you think about the sort of inherited characteristics that you have from your father, when you tell that story, which I can see the pride in your eyes as you tell it, you know, what are the sort of inherited? What did you learn from that, from being your dad's son essentially, and being witness to that astonishing story?
I think tenacity, you know, and that will to win and to keep going. You know, Dad's mantra is never, ever, ever, ever give up. And, you know, I've seen that so many times, and I see it now. Like, we have 9 out of 10 things we do are abject failures or cock-ups, but we just keep going, you know, and I think that's so easily said, but the ability to just pick yourself up, dust yourself up, go again is something that is really quite rare and unique, and sometimes quite exhausting, being around Dad, you know, being around that kind of perfectionism and tenacity.
He's still around the business, obviously, as founder.
I mean, he'll be 80 next year. He kind of comes in, throws a brick in the pond, tells me it was much better in his day, and then goes for lunch and pisses off back home. But do you know what? It's an absolute pleasure working with him. And I was worried when I first suggested the idea. I'd had this successful property career, but 2 things happened. Dad had bought the business back with this consortium, so it once again felt like a private family business. And the second thing, which you mentioned in your intro, was that Mum was diagnosed with early-onset Alzheimer's. And I kind of knew that this beautiful kind of family legacy I didn't really know much about. So those kind of twin motivations really compelled me to give it a go. So I went to see Dad and I said, Dad, I'm going to give up property and give Iceland a go. And he said, don't bother, collect rents. It's much easier. And he was sort of right, but I was so determined to do it. And I was like, look, I'm going to show you. And maybe it was reverse psychology on his part, but I spent a year stacking shelves around London stores. Best year of my life. Learned so much about the business.
Really? Best year of your life?
I mean it. But, you know, because it was obviously something that, like, I'd never really done. But I made friends for life. You know, the guy I almost ran the London Marathon with was my store manager at Greenford. And I've been to weddings of the store teams and parties. We absolutely loved that period. But also it taught me a lot. It taught me a lot about business. The prices at Iceland are centrally set. The merchandising, where we put things, is all centrally determined. So you think, how much can a store manager actually add? Well, a good store manager can put 20% on the sales, and that is through the power of motivation, of camaraderie, of teamwork. And that was an absolute golden lesson, seeing managers like Simon Felstead, you know, just absolutely kill it in terms of sales, when you'd think on the face of it he doesn't have that much autonomy. But the main thing I learned was it was just so humbling. You know, these 30,000 amazing colleagues work super hard, and I owe them everything.
Just give me a better idea of what was in your mind when, as you were making that decision. You know, as you mentioned there, your mum's diagnosis with early onset Alzheimer's. I mean, you could look at that and sort of reach a conclusion. Well, which I suspect is far too easy a conclusion to reach. You know, the clock is ticking for me too, right? That I've got to get on, and I've got to decide where I'm going to direct my energies and my efforts.
Absolutely, that was one primary motivator. You know, early onset Alzheimer's is highly hereditary, so it you know, she wasn't right since she was 60, so it made me appreciate that my time might be limited.
And that must have been such a difficult period for you all. I mean, the diagnosis itself.
It
must have been a terrible shock.
Yeah, it really was. And it, you know, as a crisis, something you don't expect. Like, Mum and Dad worked so hard to build this incredible business, and you get to your 60s, and you can finally start to take your foot off the gas, enjoy the fruits of your success, and he couldn't, you know. And it was exceptionally sad in that regard.
How did you manage it as a family, can I ask?
We just, I think we became closer as a family, you know, probably had more honest conversations. Dad softened his Yorkshire edges a little bit, and we just started showing up for each other a lot more.
It's the cruelest of illnesses, isn't it?
It really is, yeah. But, very proud of the fundraising that we've done. In a way, it was motivating for me to go into Iceland, and empowering in that sense. But we've raised tens of millions for Alzheimer's research. I raised £1 million when I climbed Everest for Alzheimer's. So we tried to turn it into as much positive as we could.
So that moment then when you decide, I'm sure it wasn't a moment, but that period when you decide, actually, this is the decision I'm going to make. Having sort of had such an independent path up until that point, what is it then that causes you to say, no, I really want to go in now and all in with the family business? Just give me a better idea of what the sort of thinking was in your mind.
I suppose I just wanted to smash it, to prove that I could do really well at it, because I was surrounded by people who would presume you're just the boss's son and everything's on a silver spoon. In fact, a good friend of yours and mine, he's been on this pod, is John Roberts, who, you can't take the lad out of Bolton, and he certainly speaks his mind sometimes. But I never forget when he floated AO, I think even now he'd admit there was a little bit of hubris. And he did this newspaper interview where he just on paper, banked a couple of 100 million. But he said, I'm going to still send my kids to private school, and they've got to succeed on their own account. Look at the kids of famous people. It's too difficult for them. He said Callum Best will always be George Best's son, and Richard Walker will always be Malcolm Walker's son. And this was like the first week I'd joined Iceland head office, and I was mortified because I knew that this is people's assumption. But I turned it and I was like, I'm gonna show you as well, John. I'm going to smash it. And I used it as a tool and a motivator to throw myself double time into the business. I spoke to Simon Wolfson, Lord Wolfson, about this from Next. And, he came through a family connection into the business and has led, one of the most successful FTSE 100 businesses for decades. But he said you just have to be yourself, but probably work doubly as hard to prove yourself as well. And he's right. And then Dad called me the other day, and I wish I could write this down and put it on the wall, because he said, someone's just asked me, are you Richard Walker's father? I was like, yes, I've made it.
Oh, wonderful. Wonderful. I mean, you're sitting there laughing about it, but
yeah,
I mean,
but that was good. That felt good.
What did you say to your dad?
Just keep saying that over and over again.
Just keep saying it. Fantastic. So the process then of actually kind of working your way through the business, the expectation from the outside looking in, you've made that decision. Yes, you've gone all in. Yes, you're going to do it properly. Yes, you're going to start on the shop floor. But the expectation from outside looking in was, well, it's all obviously going to only end one way. You are going to end up running this business. Was that the given? Did you feel like that was a given?
No, not at all, because when I grew up, Iceland was a public business. My dad just happened to be the founder of it and the boss, but, nepotism wasn't an option. Obviously, when you're a private business, I'm smiling saying this, but when you're a private business, you do have a bit more leeway to protect the family shareholding and have people in responsibility who are family members. However, the big reason for Iceland's success is, yes, we're now a private family business again, but we think like a proper big listed business. We have all of the governance in place, the executive board, the trading board, and I have no right to have a top job in the company if I'm not good enough to do it, and I'm acutely aware of that. And I would very much hope that I get the tap on the shoulder if I wasn't pulling my weight, if I wasn't doing things.
Do you feel that's understood sort of externally? Do you think the media understand that? Do the staff understand that?
I don't know if it's understood by the media, and I think nowadays, I talked about growing up a bit, I don't care. But with the staff, who I genuinely care about, they're our secret weapon and the heart of the business. They love that the founder, the family are still operational and in the business and drop in shops and make the time of day for them. That's very different to the other big supermarkets. You have to book a meeting months in advance and go down the corridor, and it's all very structured and hierarchical. Iceland's not like that at all. And that gives us our very unique culture, which is, family orientated. Yes, we're a family business, but we're a business of families. I mean, we've got generations of people, of dads and daughters and mums and aunties and uncles who work through every layer of the business. And I'm very proud of that. And one of our biggest accolades has been voted the best big company to work for in Britain by the Sunday Times twice. We're still on the list. We were the biggest company on the list, which has just been published this year, and the only supermarket as well. And that's as voted by our colleagues. Let's face it, we're a kind of close to minimum wage, mass market, high volume, northern-based food retailer, and yet we're always on that list. And people say, how do you do that, And I think it's about people feeling valued and feeling that they really are part of something, and feeling that, they're appreciated. So I'm rambling, but one last thing on that list. One question is, how well do you think you're paid? Not how much are you paid, how well do you think you're paid? We came top, Goldman Sachs came second.
That's superb. You had to prove yourself to the staff, to the team.
Yeah.
You're also, through that, having to prove yourself to your dad. Moments of tension, one imagines.
Oh, all the time. Yeah, all the time. And, he's said things to me over the years, like, you'll never be as hungry as I was. And once I've taken initial offence at that, I'm like, well, yeah, he's probably true, because he came from nothing. So that's fair. Doesn't mean I won't be more successful or enjoy the business or grow it to the next level. And I think the key thing is to try and not emulate. It's to add.
And to find your own version of hunger.
Yeah. Yes. Exactly.
So what's
that's a great way.
How would you then define your version of hunger? We've talked about the wanting to prove that you can do it.
Yeah.
Right. That you're your own man. Big tick. What else is there in you that you say sort of feeds the hunger?
I don't know, and it probably there probably is a bit of a darkness to that as well. In terms of what can drive you. If I'm honest.
Go on.
Because, I don't know. I mean, I probably need a shrink to unpack it, but
we're happy to.
We're
free
free sessions.
And
okay,
we're free.
Great. Yeah, that sounds good. But no, there is something in me. Climbing to the summit of Everest, is an exceptionally painful, dangerous, hard, stupid thing to do. I always like getting myself out of my comfort zone and challenging myself, and I'm not sure why. But I am very hungry for as much kind of success as I see it.
And risk? What's your relationship
yeah,
with
definitely
risk?
Yeah. I think the thing that I find very important is to get myself out of my comfort zone, and this obviously lovely life that I have, to continue to be uncomfortable, to challenge myself, to really kind of get to the core of what I am.
Let's talk about Everest. You did one trip up to the North Col.
Yeah, 2011.
2011 with your dad.
Yeah,
and then went back.
Yeah,
essentially to,
finish the job.
But also to raise a tremendous amount of money for a charity that was in support of those who similar diagnosis as your mum. It was a pretty hairy trip. You got to the top. The descent was difficult to put it mildly. Just tell us what happened.
Well, when I first went with Dad in 2011, we were exactly the sort of people you hear about that have no business being on the mountain. But we wanted to raise money for Alzheimer's because Mum had just been diagnosed. We went on the North Tibetan side and we got halfway up. Great result, and I came home safely. But I always wanted to finish it off because I knew I could have done it. And when Mum passed away in 2001, it kind of felt like full circle, and I wanted to sort of finish it off in her honour. But also the charitable foundation, the Iceland Charitable Foundation, was 50 years old that year, and it's now raised £37 million for good causes. Incredible. So I wanted to do the biggest thing I could imagine, and that was to go back to Everest. And this time I did it totally different on the south side in Nepal, and it was just me, one other guy, Kenton Cool, That's
The
actually
brilliantly named Kenton Call.
actually his name, and Dorji Sherpa. So it was 3 of us for a fast and light expedition. Took less than a month. We hit it really hard, but I was so determined to do it. It was the most dangerous year on record. 18 people lost their lives that year, which was exceptionally bad year. And
because of crowding and the cold and the temperature that year.
It was the cold, yeah. I mean, yes, Everest crowded, but you get 450 climbing permits issued a year. You'll get 400, and it's Everest, so it can take those volumes of numbers. You get 450 people in half an hour on the top of Snowdon in the summer. So that, people have to understand the context. But yeah, 18 people died, including a guy on our expedition that we were affiliated with. And,
someone you met.
Yeah, he was the first guy that welcomed me into base camp, and we used to eat in the mess tent together every lunch and dinner. His name was Peter, and he'd tell me all about his work back home in Canada as a medic, and also his plans to climb with his son when he got back home.
Right.
And he never did. He died at Camp 4, which is a horrible place to die. It's up in the death zone. Your body's shutting down. You can't eat. It's really a ticking clock, and it's way above the height of helicopter rescue. So he couldn't get down quick enough. And what does it teach you? I suppose it teaches you that it really is a crazy, risky enterprise, but it also, that life is very short, that you have to really enjoy and have passion and purpose in what you do, or else you've got no business doing it. And I had my own issues. We were the first on the summit. Great summit, but we weren't there long because it was so cold. We came down, and I started to have a pressure build up in my eyes, kind of a retinal hemorrhage. So I lost about 60% of my vision coming down off the summit of Everest, having been climbing for over 24 hours, still with another 7 hours before I got back to high camp, which is still in the death zone.
That might be the very definition of suboptimal.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. And there was nothing I could do about it. You just had to dig in and stop moaning and get down.
But you had to stay on the mountain, right?
Yeah. There's nothing I could do.
What do you remember of that night?
I was really scared, and I recorded a video actually to say thank you to all the Iceland colleagues who'd supported and donated and done their own charity raising. But you can see my eyes are just a ballooning mess. And looking back, you can see how scared I am.
You were thinking you might die.
I was up high because we came off the summit and we got caught in a bottleneck where there were 20 climbers trying to come up, and we had to go down, but it's the one place where you can't unclip and go around them. So I just had to lie there for an hour whilst they crawled past me. This was up the Hillary step. I could feel my eyes starting to go, and the worst thing of all is that I was lying next to a dead body. From
a long since.
From 2019.
Right.
Yeah. So I was really scared.
I mean, one might say that those experiences would lead you to think, I'm going to go and find another way to scratch this itch of mine, rather than keep returning to the mountains. But it had the exact opposite effect on you.
I think so. Yeah. I mean, it's the definition of selfish egotism, of course.
Are we starting to get towards the darkness that you mentioned?
Oh, you're very good. Okay. Yeah, maybe. But I also find it a very noble pursuit to truly understand what you're made of, Yeah. And I don't know.
Well,
why.
This comes to I guess this comes to it's part and parcel of the same piece. I don't want to start drawing clunky lines between these little moments, but when I see you on piers, slight smile on your face, and we go to this moment where actually your reaction to what is a extremely dramatic, very dangerous situation is to say, I think I'll have another go at that. It's part of the same thing, isn't it? It is part of the same thing.
Yeah. No, that's true. I like going on Question Time, and I love the risk and the jeopardy of it, and what can come at you from the audience. And it is definitely part of the same thing. Yeah. Challenging yourself.
This is also a very common characteristic in those who decide to go into politics, but you know that. So let's just jump to that very quickly.
Yeah.
So you wanted to be a Conservative Member of Parliament and worked pretty hard at getting selected. That didn't happen. And then later, the Labour Party manifesto launch which led to our new government.
Yeah.
You aligned yourself with that moment.
Yeah.
You're not. I don't think you're a member of the Labour Party now.
No,
Are you? No,
never donated.
never donated. But this political thing that you have inside you, how would you describe your sort of political ambitions right now? You still fancy it? You still want it?
I'd say I'm in hibernation, long-term hibernation,
Right.
to the point where I look back and think, what on earth was I thinking wanting to be an MP?
Right.
But I just had it in my head that this was the route for me and I'd be really good at it and I could make a difference. And I was desperate to be a player on the pitch rather than just a commentator on the sidelines. But a lot of things happened. I mean, firstly, the power of, one thing Everest taught me is to appreciate what you already have and stop chasing different unicorns. And I realised that this amazing business is a platform to drive change and campaign and actually have way more power and influence than I would as a backbench MP. But secondly, I was messed around so badly by the Tories. It became a bit of a joke. They gave me a comprehensive pass to become a candidate, but they blocked me from applying anywhere in the country. And I never really got a proper reason out of them why, and the reason kept changing. And ultimately, CCHQ tapped me on the shoulder and said, look, I'd just give up. And I think the reality, and I mean this with all sincerity, is we have a political system that discourages and actively pushes away people with real-world experience and opinions of their own. Because ultimately what you have to have as a party is lobby fodder, people who will toe the line, be whipped and do as they're told.
Your view is that you were basically viewed as being too independent.
Yeah,
independently minded, I should say.
Yeah,
and that you therefore wouldn't be enough of a team player.
Yeah, and I didn't know the game. That is the biggest no-no you can possibly say. Because in my world, that's ambition and wanting to have the top job and and working as hard as you can to get there. So that's what I said. But within the party system, that's very bad. Because you have to bow down and praise your leader. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know how you fix that one. It's an interesting issue,
the way our
right?
system is.
It's the way the system is.
I'll just tell you one last thing on as a segue between mountains and politics, drawing a link. There's a book by Robert Macfarlane called Mountains of the Mind, and he said, those who seek mountaintops are half in love with themselves and half in love with oblivion. I think that's exactly the same for politics.
I think that's spot on. That's spot on. But you do also agree with that in terms of your own motivations, would you? Yeah. Brilliant. So look, let's get back a bit. November 2018, the ad that I mentioned earlier, massive success, very clever move. From a comms point of view, which is my game. I was very admiring of it as a piece of strategy. That interview with Piers, the motivations and the values that sit behind it are being challenged a bit. And then in January, the BBC reported that, in fact, the business, despite the promise that it had made, had continued to sell own brand products, because that's what you were clearing out. Obviously, you had no control over other people's brands, but you were determined that your own brand products would be free of palm oil. And in fact, there were a number of lines where there was still palm oil, and all you'd done is taken the brand off the boxes. Yeah. Right. So a proper test of, values and integrity and everything else. Yeah. When you found out, presumably there's a moment when someone said, I don't know if it was as a result of the BBC making the call or you'd found out yourselves. The BBC
sent us the identical packaging, one with the Iceland label on, one without, which obviously came from someone internally.
Yeah. So that moment, tell us how you felt and then how you reacted, how you managed it.
Well, I was absolutely mortified because this amazing piece of campaigning, Google searches of the phrase palm oil had gone up 10,000%. We had done more than anyone to raise awareness on this critical issue of tropical rainforest devastation. And I was so proud of the technical team. 450 lines. It took us 2 years to really relearn how to do mass-scale food manufacturing without palm oil, because it's in 50% of all products. So it was a real win. And he wouldn't mind me saying this, but it was actually my dad who said, well, when we got to our self-imposed deadline of December at the end of 2018, there were 16 products where we weren't going to quite meet that deadline because the suppliers couldn't afford it, needed a bit more time to change their manufacturing lines, etc. So rather than hold a gun to their head and sack off the suppliers, we gave them another 16 weeks. And Dad said, well, just take Iceland off, because you've said if it's Iceland on the label and it's Iceland don't label, it won't have palm oil in. Simple. So that's what we did. And I felt that was okay at the time as well. But of course, I was so naive, and as was Dad. You know, the world has changed from 20, 30 years ago since he was in the dirt of the business and knowing about the comms industry. And it was a classic teed-up gotcha moment for the BBC. There were two crises here rolled into one. One was the fact that this ad was banned, and you say what a masterstroke it was and how much you admired it from a comms perspective. It wasn't premeditated. I mean, I thought this was going to be our Christmas ad that we were going to play on TV, but because it was closely affiliated with the Greenpeace ad, Clearcast at the last minute pulled it from TV.
On the basis it was a political ad, essentially.
Political ad. So it was deemed too political, and I was mortified. I almost handed in my resignation because I thought...
Did you really?
At our golden quarter, the most important time for the business, we're without anything on TV. It was an absolute disaster.
How far did that conversation go? Because that would have been a chat with your dad.
Yeah, I mean, what then happened very quickly is I put it out on Twitter, and then by the end of the first week, tens of thousands of likes. By the end of the second week, Ricky Gervais, Stephen Fry retweeting it, James Corden. It's now had over 100 million views, and it's become the most watched Christmas ad of all time, and it was banned from TV.
Yeah.
So
it's epic.
That was awesome, because also it does rewrite the rules of TV advertising a little bit as well.
Absolutely.
But yeah, this BBC gotcha, I was mortified. But the way I dealt with it, there was an interview with on BBC Breakfast, and I just remembered how indignant I was. Yeah, I was embarrassed and annoyed at myself, but I was indignant at the fact people were questioning my moral compass on this issue. I'd been out to Westman Kalimantan. I'd met the people. I knew the issues inside out more than anyone, and I had the confidence to stand up there and say, how dare you question my morals? You know, yes, I've learned a big lesson. We should have just simply put out a blog on the 1st of January and said these 16 lines will have Iceland back on the label once palm oil's out in 16 weeks' time. But we didn't, and the lesson I learnt was to always communicate the journey, the good, the bad, the ugly, even the stuff that you think, as I honestly did at the time, that it was a bit trivial, is really important. But the interview I'm most proud of is that BBC Breakfast interview with Naga, because she didn't stand a chance. I just, in a very polite way, just said, how dare you.
So the advice there for others is, if you know who you are, you know who you are.
Yeah.
And there were mistakes made.
Yeah.
Just lean into the mistake.
Absolutely.
Transparency.
Yeah.
Front it up.
Own it completely. We've had issues recently with animal rights people with regards to battery eggs and the like. And actually, you can't hide away in times like that. You need to front it and own it. And as the face of the brand, I can't just do a tap dance when things are good. I need to talk about it when things are bad as well. People say you're a good communicator. I mean, I think I say and ah and maybe waffle a bit. But the reason some people think I'm a good communicator is because I always try and come at it from a position of integrity and honesty. And I think people very quickly can see that, and they can smell it when it's not.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Let's talk quickly about another Iceland initiative that you've led to help rehabilitate ex-offenders with your Iceland employment scheme. I think I'm right in saying that you've now given jobs to upwards of 300 ex-offenders in the last few years. And you're now suggesting that with the crisis that we have in prisons with overcrowding, that one answer to that might be, rather than giving people short sentences, let's get them straight into a job.
And pay them.
Crucially.
Yeah.
Which is the bit that often falls off the end. You're quite right, because that's the key to it all.
Of course. Otherwise, they wouldn't turn up.
Exactly. Tell us what the motivation was behind that.
I mean, firstly, but for the grace of God, and having gone into prisons and interviewed people, a few more wrong turns in life, and you think, well, That could have been me. And then these guys and girls get caught in this cycle of reoffending. And I think we have a completely broken system where people, the amount of short sentences, people are sentenced to 6 months, they serve 3, it does nothing to rehabilitate them and absolutely everything to mess up their lives. And they come out, they've lost the rent on their house, they've got nowhere to live, their girlfriend or wife has left them, their kids hate them, they've got no job, and guess what, they're back in again in a month on another short sentence. So prison is full of people with 6, 7, 8 term on these short sentences. But if you can give someone a concrete job when they leave prison, they are 50% less likely to reoffend. That's official statistics, because it becomes the hub of the wheel from which you can rebuild your life. And what we do, which is different to Timpson's or anyone else, is we give them a firm, concrete, written job offer when we interview them in prison, and that is binding. And I've seen pictures of prison cell walls with that job offer on the wall, because it's a really powerful symbol of hope. And they know that is the hub of the wheel from which they're going to rebuild their life.
One of the things that I'm quite proud of with this podcast, which was partly born out of my having been in prison and the lack of kind of positive content that I found, in prison, is this podcast is now available in quite a number of prisons. We're on the Launchpad system that is, that's now rolling out across the prison estate. So there will be a fair number of fellas sitting and women sitting in prison now, hopefully listening to this conversation. What would you say to those people, in the context of this scheme that you have that will definitely kind of cross their path at some point?
Well, we call it the Second Chance Initiative because I truly believe everyone deserves a second chance, and it's such a powerful initiative. We're now the biggest recruiter of ex-offenders in the UK by a mile. We've offered actually over 1,000 people a job now. And if you're interested, come and join us, because what we're finding is these people are so grateful for a second chance, and they're grafters and they want to do well and progress. So we're finding that these colleagues have lower labour turnover than our standard colleagues, less sickness and higher retention rates. So like I said, it's good for society, it reduces reoffending. It's actually great for business as well, because we've got grafters who are grateful for the opportunity and want to progress.
Wonderful. Well, congratulations on it. You and your wife are raising 2 daughters, one of whom is sat just slightly outside of the studio at the moment listening to this. You're raising those girls in a pretty challenging world. When you look at everything you've been through, the loss, the battles, the physical challenges, everything that we've discussed, what are the sort of fundamental lessons that you hope that they'll extract? I asked what lessons you've learned from your father. What lessons do you think your girls are learning from you?
Well, I'm very proud of them.
And your wife.
I'm very proud of them because they're grafters, and my eldest has just finished her GCSEs, but the very next day she started her summer job, and she's been working there ever since, and it's because she loves it. And I think whatever they end up doing, I don't care if they want to go into shopkeeping or property or the restaurant business that we have. I just want them to be really passionate about it and to really try and strive to be the very best that they can be. If they want to go into restaurants, well, be the restaurant manager or own the restaurant, even better. And I think knowing your value and feeling that sense of worth is so important to give people confidence and permission to go as far as they can.
Because of course one might say they could end up with the same. There's the old saying, isn't there, about successful families. The first generation make it, the second generation spend it, the third generation.
Clogs to clogs in 3 generations.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, they're going to have their own version of that, aren't they? In the same way as you did.
I guess,
you found your own drive, as we discussed earlier, and trying to steer them towards finding their own. And that's not a challenge that sits with only successful families.
No, of course.
It's a challenge that sits with every family.
Yeah, and you don't have to come from money to be spoiled.
Exactly.
So spoiled is a state of mind which is around expectancy and entitlement, and actually, the sooner they understand the world doesn't owe them a living, the better.
Wonderful. That's a great lesson. Richard, thanks so much for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Really enjoyed it.
Crisis What Crisis is a podcast really that's all about coming back from the brink to a place of strength. So if you know someone who needs that, please do share it. As always, full transcripts along with helpful links are available on our website. Just head to crisiswhatcrisis.com. Thanks as ever to the Crisis What Crisis team, Jane Sankey, Hannah Walker-Brown, Rex Fisher, Mabel Pickering and the brilliant people at Global. And thank you so much for listening.
Yeah, you see